In the corporate counsel unit, a small but growing number of in-house counsel legal teams have been changing the delivery systems for corporate legal services. With a focus on value, non-traditional dispute resolution, and leveraging people, technology, and information, these courageous teams have challenged conventional wisdom, as well as a deeply embedded and elite status quo. This is their story.
Law department, please hold. Law department, please hold. What do you want?
I need to see a lawyer about this contract.
Nobody sees a lawyer, not no way, not no how. Just slip it under the door. They'll get back to you when they're good and ready.
In short, business as usual just wasn't going to be an option for us. We had to find new ways to become more efficient, more effective, and accessible. And I knew that we could blaze new trails for the FMC Technologies legal team. It's all summed up in our mission statement, which starts out with a very simple statement. We are not lawyers. But of course we are in fact lawyers. The point is we're not the kind of lawyers that you're used to dealing with. We look at things from the client's perspective, from the customer's viewpoint. Good morning. It is always painful to watch yourself on video. I used to be that guy. I'm not that guy anymore. I stepped down from my job as General Counsel of FMC Technologies about 2 years ago, and I retired. It's been an interesting couple of years. Some people have said that I'm a failure at retirement. I'm working a lot more than I'd like and a lot less than other people would like me to work. But you got to know who I was a little bit there. What I'd like to know now, this is a big room, there are an awful lot of people. I need to understand my audience a little bit. So how many of you in this room are customers of the legal delivery system? How many of you are suppliers in the legal delivery system? How many of you are technologists? How many MBAs? Wow, that's scary. How many engineers? Thank God, thank God. How many lawyers? Okay. Well, I want to go back to the very first two questions. I think one person raised their hand to being a customer. That's absolutely incorrect. Each and every person in this room is a customer of the legal delivery system. Whether you're in a firm, whether in your individual life, whether you're outside, whether you're inside, you are receiving services from some portion of the legal industry. Each and every one of you is a supplier in the legal industry. You're providing outputs to somebody else in the chain in work that they're doing. So what I like to tell people, hopefully this works, can we switch over to the, maybe? I need technical assistance. So when I retired, I went from who's who to who's he really, really quickly. What I like to tell people now is I'm not a lawyer. I'm a race car driver. Because for a little while, I would tell people I was retired. And then I have to say something like, but I used to be the general counsel of a Fortune 500 company. Used to, be the king of my own domain, had people working for me. Now I think I'm my wife's person. But it's a lot more interesting to talk about being a race car driver. It's a heck of a lot more interesting in a cocktail party conversation to say I'm a race car driver. I'm going to come back to the race car driver a little later, and you'll see the connection with what everyone in this room does. But first, why should you listen to me, of all people? I mean, it was a very nice introduction. Thank you very much for that, Michael. I really appreciate it. It's always dangerous to be called a visionary, because you know what a visionary is? A visionary is somebody who history later proves is correct and the current reality can't quite yet disregard. If you're wrong over time, you're just a fool and an idiot. So I'm hoping I stay in the visionary category. But when I first took the job as general counsel of FMC, and I was in-house for 21 years, I was in the chair for 13. When I first took the job, these were our stats. The company was about $1.8 billion. We'd been spun off from FMC Corp. I had 8 lawyers, and we had a total spend of about $14.5 million. Even back then, we were doing some work on AFAs, which we don't actually call alternatives, we call value-based fees. And even back then, we were evaluating our firms, and on a scale of 1 to 5, our firms had an average of 2.8. Go forward about a dozen years, about 10 years, just before I left, the last full year before I left, the company grew substantially. We increased to 12 lawyers. We insourced work because law is the only place I know of where insourcing makes sense. Something fundamentally wrong there. But our total legal spend had declined to $9.5 million. 95% of the spend was in AFAs, 3.3 average firm evaluation. But here's the real kicker. On average, we paid our firms 7% more than what they billed us. I would submit to you that in a world where fees go up 5% a year to 10% a year, my internal costs went up 5% a year, the company more than tripled in size. I would submit to you that you can't have statistics like that unless you fundamentally change what you do and how you do it. And that's why I hope the stories that I'll tell you today might resonate a little bit with you. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about the environment, what I call the lawland environment, which is an evil parallel universe to the real world. I'm going to talk a little bit about P3, your P3s, but I have my own set of P3s. And I'm going to talk about both. And then at the end, we're going to do something called a hot wash. And the only reason I'm going to do that is because it's something that we do each and every day in everything we do, every meeting we have, we do a hot wash. A hot wash is a fast track after action. The fundamental reason I'm doing it for you today and asking you to participate in it is I hope that you'll adopt it in your own practice when you go back. Because this is the single most powerful tool that you could use today to increase your performance. So let's talk about the environment. And I want to talk about the environment from my first set of P3s. And again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm an executive and a leader. And so I want to talk about what I call P3 Prime, the Prime Directive if you're a Star Trek fan. It's the most important part of organizational functions. Any organization has to have a vision, a purpose. Why are we here? What are we doing? And then the executive level has 3 functions and only 3 functions. It's to establish the environment for success of the enterprise. And it does that by focusing on these 3 Ps: principles, people, and platforms. And when I say principles, those are core values. Those are things that we believe. In order to accomplish our vision, we have to have a set of behaviors, a set of principles that we believe in. And it's actually really hard work to develop what your principles are. I hear law firms, when I was in the chair, I had people come marketing to me all the time, and they wanted to talk to me about their culture, and they wanted to talk to me about their quality. But they couldn't actually articulate what either of those words meant. They wanted to talk to me about innovation. but they actually didn't know what innovation meant. And innovation without purpose is nothing. Culture without consistency is chaos. So an enterprise has to define its guiding principles. It has to define the behaviors that are consistent with those principles. And it has to be absolutely rigorous in making sure that the culture surrounding those behaviors is consistent and that nonconformity to those behaviors is simply not tolerated. When I say people, people are the most important asset of any enterprise. How do you get them? How do you train them? How do you unleash them? And how do you retain them? And here's where culture really comes into place. We tend to hire in the legal industry for credentials and credibility. I would submit to you that those two are just the entry stakes at the table. They actually don't have much to do with effectiveness on a legal team. Culture is what matters. And so it's all about getting the right people on the bus, keeping the right people on the bus. And if you got the wrong people on the bus, it doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that they're not consistent with the culture, the behaviors, the rules, the policies that you've determined. You got to get them off the bus. And then the last are platforms. Those are all the different things an organization needs in order to do its work. Whether it's an HR platform, a marketing platform, a technology platform, customer relations platform, knowledge management, financial management, all the different platforms in an organization, in an environment for the success of the enterprise. So that's P3 prime. Let me break that down, put it in this little chart, because this chart's going to come back to haunt you a couple of times in this presentation. As a leader, the three functions: principles, people, and platforms. That's what the leaders do. The leaders don't micromanage. The leaders don't get down in the weeds. The leaders establish the environment and unleash the assets for success of the enterprise. Some of you that have heard me talk about these four boxes. The legal service industry, everything it does falls into one of these four boxes: process, content, advocacy, or counseling. And when I say advocacy, I don't simply mean court advocacy. It's lobbying, it's contract negotiation. Process and content is what the legal industry is built on today. Why? Because that's where the hours are. And like it or not, we're still in a world with billable hours. We shouldn't be, but we are. Advocacy and counseling, that's where lawyering actually matters and comes into play. Those are the two things that separate a lawyer, and the only two things that separate a lawyer from other professions and other activities. It's judgment. It's not knowledge, it's judgment. And those are the two boxes where judgment comes into play. Lawyers actually shouldn't be very involved in the process and content side of things because they're both expensive at it. Other people can do it. They may be guided by lawyers. The lawyers can build those processes, but they don't need to operate them. I defy you to give me any activity of the legal services industry that I cannot put in one of those four boxes. And then my question to you is, where is it on the knowledge and judgment scale, and who needs to do it? So in that environment, there are four kinds of legal service providers. Old law is not in the business of solving legal problems. They're in the business of billing hours to solve legal problems. New law, also not in the business of solving legal problems. They're in the business of billing lower cost hours to solve legal problems. Engaged law actually is in the business of solving legal problems effectively and efficiently. And then there's what I call next law. Next law is in the business of preventing legal problems from ever arising in the first place. For after all, the best legal problem is the one that you never have, if you're the customer. Let's talk about customers. Four kinds of customers in this world. There's actually a pre-customer, and that's the person that's just performing triage and trying to handle whatever comes over their desk and over the transom at any time. But as customers get a little bit more enlightened, they first focus on, what do we do as a legal team? What do we provide as a legal team to our customer? Certain things are not high value, certain things don't need a lawyer to do them, certain things don't need a law firm to do them. So we empower others. We may give them tools, self-help tools, but we focus on what I would call creative denial of service. in order to cut down the work of the in-house department. After you kind of go through that process and you render some cost out of the system, then you look at, what do we do? I'm sorry, who does it, not the what. Who does it? And this is kind of the phase that we're in today, most folks. And it's all about insourcing, outsourcing, near sourcing, far sourcing. It's labor arbitrage and cost arbitrage. It's who does it. After you kind of get through that process, you go to how it's done. And that's all about process optimization. It's all about rendering fat out of the system and figuring out how you can do the work better, faster, less expensively, with more quality. Nirvana, the end state, is why. Why is the work being done in the first place? What's generating the demand? And this is where the prevention side comes in. If you can prevent the legal problem from ever arising, the work doesn't need to be done. You have to be good at managing the stuff that does come up, the process optimization stuff. You have to know who should be doing the work, the most productive asset to do the work at the lowest cost, and then whether or not it's even a legal issue, whether or not you should be doing it. But the nirvana, as I said, the end state, the end game, is focusing on why. And if you start at that point, if you start at the point of asking about why, it guides all that you do throughout. So how do you reconcile these two trends, these customers and the suppliers? Well, I think in the first wave, it's what I call the Hunger Games. And the suppliers and the customers are going opposite ways. If you were in the grief stage here, this would be in the anger stage, okay? Because, the prior stage is denial. Anger is, you're going to treat them like suppliers and supply chain and all that kind of stuff. But what did the in-house folks do when they were looking at the what side? Well, first they still looked at attorney-to-client relationships. They went through convergence programs. They migrated to smaller regional firms or boutique firms. What did the firms do? The old law firms, remember the firms that are there to bill hours, not to solve problems? There's still a tournament environment within the law firm environment, among the associates, even among the partners. That's why it's called the Hunger Games. In order to cut costs, de-equitization, which de-equitization actually is a lot like share repurchase in the real world. It doesn't actually add any value whatsoever, except to the owners. It doesn't change the fundamental value of the enterprise. It just changes the allocation of that value. And annual rate increases, as if it were a natural law. The second wave is what I call Game of Thrones. And the in-house, this is the who stage. So, it's the rise of the procurement professionals, the supply chain folks that come in and tell the lawyers how they're going to start buying services, because after all, legal services are just widgets and paper clips, right? It's the sourcing stuff, the in, out, near, far. The use of RFPs and fixed fees. On the law firm side, both old and new law, merger mania. I don't know, as a customer, I never saw a law firm merger that actually provided any value whatsoever to me as the customer. Rates always went up. I had irritating people marketing to me all the time that I didn't want to talk to. And it's always justified on the basis of our customers want this. I don't know. As a customer, I was never asking for it. Lateralization is what I call the mint on the pillow phenomena, where lawyers move to the hotel across the street because they like the mint on the pillow better, the compensation. Now, we enabled that on the in-house side by saying every time an in-house lawyer says we hire the lawyer, not the law firm, we just converted ourselves to chattel. We made ourselves part of that lawyer's book and enabled that lawyer to move for a better mint. And the mint always costs the customer more money. And then there's the passive AFA resistance. Oh, we'd love to do alternative fees, but our customers are not asking for it. The third wave, rise of the machines. On the in-house side, we're starting to look at Six Sigma and lean and process optimization, results-based fees. And here, notice that the arrows have changed. We're starting to work together and talk together more, true partnering in a reduction of costs and an increase in performance. The engaged law firms, the ones that actually are there to solve clients' problems effectively and efficiently, they're creating subsidiaries that have lower cost in lower cost areas. The LPO rise, project management increasingly on the horizon, and then value-based fees. So the fourth wave is mystery men. You probably don't get that reference because it's a really strange little movie, but Mystery Men is all about a set of people who want to be superheroes, but they're just ordinary people like you and me. They go and they do their jobs well every single day. They prevent things from going wrong. They're the unsung heroes. You know, part of the problem with our current situation in both law and generally is that we love heroes. We absolutely adore them. We love firefighters. We hate the insurance inspector that comes in and tells us that we have to put in a sprinkler system because that costs money. But boy, do we love those heroes. Wouldn't it be better not to have the fire? So in this phase, there's overlap and convergence, and the convergence is on that prevention side. It's addressing why the issues arose in the first place and trying to stop them from arising again. Again, best legal problem is the one you never have. And on the firm side, it's facilitation of that. There are always going to be crises to handle. I mean, we may want to go to a no litigation world. In fact, my CEO one year, he made one of my objectives that we have absolutely no lawsuits, which was kind of hard for a company our size. We did get it down to about 10 cases. So I now want to talk about one of your P's, project management, one of your P3s. Again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a race car driver. Why is this important? Because what a race car driver actually is a project manager. Okay? I mean, they're an operator too, they're running their car, but if you act as a solo performer in a race car or in a fighter jet, you die, or people get hurt, or property gets destroyed. You have to leverage your team constantly, and more importantly, you have to use the P3 called the P3 that is a perfect execution model. So they're truly managers, and a manager has 3 roles in an organization. They work on the policies, the relationships between people inside and outside, and enterprises inside and outside, and they do the project management side. I'm going to talk about that F3 column here, which is all a P3 column. So we got across the top, principles, people, and platforms, and down the bottom, platforms and projects. A simplified project is just a series of processes put together, a series of inputs and outputs that result in the desired output at the end. Whatever it is the customer wanted, that's the output, and that's a project. It's no more difficult than that. We can use Gantt charts. We can put lots of tasks up. We can really complexify the hell out of this, but it's really pretty simple. It's just a set of processes linked end-to-end in a logical fashion. That's why I said each and every one of you in here is both a customer and a supplier. When you're working on one of those processes, you're taking inputs from somebody, you're a customer, and you're providing an output to somebody else, you're a supplier. Does that sound like a manufacturing kind of environment, like what I came from, manufacturing? Yeah, it does. But it's the same environment in any place. You're taking inputs, you're taking information, data, content, and you're producing something for the next person in the chain. The next person in the chain might be the ultimate customer, might not. So my P3 in this particular area is P3.1, the project management platform. It's the perfect execution model of planning, performing, and perfecting. These are the 3 steps for every project that you have to go through, all right? And most people, when they talk about project management, they talk about performance, talk about execution. That's actually the least important step in these 3. Most people never look at what happened at the end to see if it went well or went badly. That's a perfection side. The actual most important step is the plan. And planning is no more than a W3, who does what when. Okay? It's pretty simple. We can make it really complex but conceptually, it's pretty simple. And if you get the plan right, and the plan has first an objective, second a team, and then third the processes that you're going to link end to end to come up with the program. If you get that right, execution, the performance side, goes well, and you have zero defects in it. If things change during execution, you modify the plan. It's not that difficult. And the way you pressure test all of this is in the perfection stage. When it's done, you take a look at how you did, what can be improved, what went well, and what are the things that we need to take a look at. And those are the two things that we're going to talk about at the end in the hot wash here. What went well in this presentation, and what are the things that we need to take a look at so that I can do this better the next time I need to do it. That's the perfection stage. Some people call it an after action, some people call it a lessons learned, some people call it a post-mortem, kind of a difficult phrase, but it's the thing that we don't do very often. And when we do it, we don't do it very well, mostly because we're lawyers. Really bad at introspection, really bad at self-criticism, really bad at taking constructive feedback. Okay? So you practice this all the time so you get better at those things. And that's why you do the hot wash all the time, so that you get better about a feedback loop that makes sense. Let's talk about the second P in your P3, process improvement. What's the link between process improvement and the other ones? Not rocket science. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm an operator. I'm operating processes. What I do. And just as the manager had 3 roles, the operator has 3 roles. They focus on tools, both the development and use of those tools, accountability, a really important word in any organization, and then the processes. So I'm going to stay on that right-hand side, that P3 of the platform's projects and processes, and talk a little bit about processes now. So I call that P3.2 in my world. It's all about processes. And processes are a set of policies linked together that you publish and then you perfect. Some people call them SOPs, standard operating procedures. You figure out how you're going to do a particular process. You have a set of steps for it, a recipe. You publish those to your organization. Everybody follows them. And you go through a continuous perfection loop, continuous improvement loop of getting feedback from the other operators about how the process is working. Now, the interesting thing about the process thing is the best process is defined in 2 words, a verb and a noun. Not a verb and an acronym, a verb and a noun. Because if you use that discipline, you scope it down to where it's meaningful. Okay? So I encourage you to go back and think about everything you do and put it in a verb and a noun. Now, what's interesting about that, because every one of those things is a process, and people in your organization operate those processes. In any organization, there are hundreds, thousands, perhaps millions of processes that occur every single day. For each and every one of those discrete processes, there can only be one process owner. There may be hundreds, there may be thousands of operators, but there can only be one process owner. Now, there may be different but related processes. Writing a brief in an IP case versus writing a brief in a personal injury case. Those might be 2 different processes. They may have some common elements to them, but they're similar, but they're different. Sometimes there are differences that don't matter. You don't understand. That might be fine for what you do, but it doesn't apply to what I do. When you scope it down, you can find that set of commonalities. And the whole idea here is consistency. Those of you that are in the marketing world, consistency is really, really important to you, because what is the counterpart of consistency? Brand. Brand is a promise to the customer of the same customer experience no matter where they touch the organization. So consistency in the processes that the enterprise uses are critical. Has to be done. So this is a continuous virtual circle that goes on constantly and is constantly being improved. Feedback from the operators to the process owner, so they publish new standard operating procedures throughout. So a simplified process, it's just what we talked about before. You know, this is one of the boxes in the project management thing. It's just blown out a little bit more. The simplified one has an operation. Somebody is doing something. Verb noun. Push clicker. That's a process. There's an input. Here it was this clicker, and there's an output, the slide. It's not rocket science. You can make it a little bit more complicated when you start putting in roles and responsibilities of the people. You got the environment. Remember the executive, the leader, establishing the environment, creating the environment where these processes and projects work. The process owner defines the rules, the controls for the particular process. The process operator operates the process. The supplier provides the input. The process operator produces an output that meets the customer's requirements. And then down at the bottom are the things that the process operator has at their disposal. In addition to the rules at the top end, you must do things this way. At the bottom side, there are those facilities that help the process operator do his or her function. That might be access to subject matter experts, tools, facilities, whatever. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about process. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a lifeguard. The reason I like the lifeguard story, it's kind of like the race story. You know, I actually do race cars. And last week I was racing. 2 days ago I was racing. And this weekend I'll be racing. I raced one day this past weekend. The sole purpose of doing that was to shake down a car that had about 30 different parts changed, and I wanted to make sure the car's okay for the race next week. And in the planning part of that, what am I going to do? I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at the videos from my race at the same track last year. And I'm going to study those videos, and I'm going to look at that data, and I'm going to talk to my team, and I'm going to educate myself on how to plan. I'm going to plan on how I'm going to run that race. And things are going to happen during the race that I'm going to have to deal with. But at least I've got the core execution side down. So the past few days, I was going through the perfection stage from last year's race and this weekend's shakedown to the planning stage on how I'm going to run the race this weekend. And hopefully the execution stage goes smoothly, and I get to come home to my wife and family, you know, in one piece, and the car in one piece. And this is kind of the same thing here. I'm not a lawyer, I'm a lifeguard. The reason I like this story is because I was a lifeguard. And in 1974, when I was a lifeguard, I met my wife. She wasn't my wife then, but I met the woman that would become my wife. And, you know, as I reflect, so it's a very important story to me. I mean, you know, I've been married for 36 years. She's a wonderful woman. She's my boss now. I'm one of her people. I used to have people. I'm now one of her people. But the reason it's so important to me is when I think back on when I was a lifeguard, you know, that's like being a firefighter. It's like being a fighter pilot. It's like being a race car driver. You know, you get to be a hero. I think back on those 3 or 4 years that I was a lifeguard, I think I went in the water once to pull somebody out, but I blew my whistle a lot. Okay? And when I was blowing my whistle, I was addressing behavior that was dangerous, that could result in an accident. And so I was practicing prevention. So what we want in this area, remember, best legal problem is the one you never have, is what I call destination zero. So you've got this perfect circle again to avoid problems, manage them when they occur, and then learn from them when they're over so you can avoid them. That's the whole prevention mantra. And to do that, if you're in-house or if you're advising folks from the outside, you focus on the why. Remember, we talked about the why. What's driving the demand? And I think legal demand comes, in 3 basic buckets. Past, which is about disputes and enforcement compliance issues. The present, general blocking and tackling, running the enterprise today. And the future, IP and deals. If you look at the cost from most organizations, most spend, it comes first in the litigation side, dealing with past problems. Thanks, Pat. And second from the future, bad deals, IP that doesn't provide any value. So if you can build better processes to not hurt people, to keep your contracts, to do the kinds of things that you need to do as a responsible organization, you can minimize a lot of the past problems. A good compliance program will stop most enforcement issues. You can't stop all litigation. You can't stop all disputes, but you can minimize them and you can mitigate them. On the future side, if you focus on IP that actually provides value to your company, if you focus on deals that are done for good purposes, as opposed to simply market growth, because most of those deals fail. 95% of deals provide no value to the company after 5 years. I wonder what that is in the law firm world, in law land, if law land is the same as the real world. I don't know. I mean, do mergers pay off? I don't know, maybe. So you focus on prevention, on the past and the future buckets, and process optimization on the present bucket. That's the way you drive step change in a legal organization to provide value to the companies, to be a trusted counselor. Whether you're inside or outside, you can do the same thing. It's not just about handling problems. It's about helping the enterprise avoid them in the future. So let's talk about your third P, pricing. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an auto body tech. And I actually was an auto body tech. Our family business was an auto body shop, and I worked in it for many years as a young man. What's really interesting about the auto body industry, has anybody here been in the auto body industry? Okay. It's a lot like the legal industry. Somebody comes in with a car that has been hit, wrecked, whatever. That's a problem, right? It's an issue that needs to be dealt with. There's a person, and back in the day, back when I was doing this, it was a guy, and he was the estimator. And he looked at all the damage on the car, and he went back to his office. He took out a big set of books, because, back in the day, they were just books. Nothing was online back then. And every part of every car, every area of every car was in that book. There was a book for Chevys, there was a book for Toyotas, there was a book, for every single brand. And every part was listed there. And every part had a price, and it had a suggested labor component. This is what it should take the auto body tech to replace or repair that part. The rule of thumb on a dent was if it was the size of your hand, it would take about an hour. That was a rule of thumb back then. I don't know what it is today, but conceptually, these rules still apply. And the estimator would go back, and they'd look at all that stuff, and they'd total everything up, and they'd figure out what the parts price was, and they'd look at the overhead of the business, and the shop supplies and whatnot, and their own labor rates, and then they would come up with a price. Okay? And it was a fixed price. It didn't change unless something was found that was different. If once they took that fender off, there was a part that the body person couldn't see or the estimator couldn't see. And there's a word for that. That's called a change order. It's just like that stuff that you saw at the video in the beginning, what FMC Technologies did. We made these really big things that we threw off the side of a ship. We installed them in 8,000 feet of water, and they were supposed to work for 20 years. We did that on a turnkey fixed price basis. And we, for at least when I was back at the company, we provided more shareholder value than any other company in the oilfield service industry. Why? Because we were good at what we did. Because we understood how to estimate our costs and our performance, and we dealt with the uncertainties of the environment. What we did at FMC Technologies was far more sophisticated and far more dangerous than anything that anyone in this room does, unless you're handling a death penalty case. And we did that every day, turnkey, fixed price basis. So I didn't have much tolerance at all for folks that came in and said, well, Jeff, you don't understand. We might have a crazy judge on the other side. Or the other part of the organization might not understand what's going on. We don't understand your facts. I mean, my basic response to that was, you told me at the front end that you'd handle hundreds of these. I've not handled any. So in the allocation of risk of uncertainty in the environment, that risk should be yours, not mine. If you're good at what you do, you'll make money on average by being good at what you do. Okay? And that's what a body shop does. Now think about, though, what's the relationship between the management of the body shop and the auto body tech? The auto body tech is an hourly person, literally gets paid by the hour. Okay? Kind of like a lawyer, right? So the auto body tech, makes more money if they work more hours, right? What's the incentive to work faster at an acceptable quality level? There isn't one. Not in law land. But in the real world, there is. Because the deal between the enterprise and the auto body tech is a sharing of efficiencies that can be gathered. If the auto body tech can perform the services faster at the acceptable level of quality than what the estimated time was, the body shop still charges the customer the same amount of money. And so the deal with the auto body tech is the shop takes part and the auto body tech takes part. And that's the alignment of interest between the enterprise and the operator. I would submit to you that those of you that are involved in pricing should think about pricing in exactly the same fashion. You have lots of data on what things have cost. May not be what they should cost, but at least you've got a starting place on what they have cost. And your objective should be to reduce that rigorously, constantly, mercilessly. Make your money on increasing your profit margin, not on increasing your top line revenue. I remember this ad. It was for a software billing package, and I think it's one of the scariest ads I'd ever seen as a customer. Bill like a lawyer. My God. I mean, in the environment that we live in today, that ad really can't exist anymore. And that's, at least from the customer side, a good thing. So the supplier's inputs, I don't do a lot of this kind of stuff. I think are costs, margin, and the market. And you use those inputs, come up with a price. If you change your focus and look at it from the customer's perspective, you start thinking about it differently. Because the customer thinks of value as what I call E3. I think I was a McKinsey consultant sometime in my former life because I think in 3s and 4s all the time. So what's E3? E3, it's not rocket science. It's effectiveness, efficiency, and experience. Now you guys are sitting here saying, oh man, we've got the most experienced team in the world. We got Supreme Court clerks. We got subject matter experts in every area of the law. We are badass in this area. We've got the experience. That is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about in experience here is the customer experience. What is the customer's experience in dealing with your enterprise? Okay? That's why consistency is so important. That's why feedback is so important. And that's why after actions are so important and change is so important. Effectiveness is delivering the customer's objective. Efficiency is doing it at or below the anticipated cost, price that you've agreed with the customer. And experience, it's summed up in that one little question: would you hire this firm again? Okay? And in a world where most legal service providers are fungible, for 80 to 85% of the matters, I would submit to you the customer experience is the only thing that matters. Okay? So you need to work on that. You need to figure out how to gather the information about it. You need to make sure that you're delivering on your brand promise to your customers. And you need to also do it effectively and efficiently. Again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm Sisyphus. I have been talking about this stuff for a really long time. Not just today. Some of you I know have heard me talk about this before. My story hasn't changed very much in 15 years, and neither has the industry. But it needs to change, and it will change, or it will seek its own irrelevance. And the biggest problem we have in our industry is MPR. Now, back when I was in the company, MPR meant monthly performance review, direct reports meeting or something like that. I'm not talking about that here. I'm talking about massive, passive resistance. I'm talking about, that project management stuff. You don't understand what I do. It's far too complicated for that. This process ownership stuff, you don't understand what I do. Processes I'm involved in. I mean, it's bespoke. This is customized work. I mean, I'm not making widgets here. I'm doing really important stuff. Alternative fees? I really don't like those. If I don't talk about them, maybe I won't have to do them. And that's just as bad on the inside as it is on the outside. Okay? And so you got to change. You got to step out of where you are. You got to stop being a firefighter and start being a fire preventer. Start using the tools that help people avoid legal problems instead of manage them. There isn't a business on the face of the earth, with the exception of a law firm or a patent troll company, that actually wants legal problems. Okay? I mean, are legal problems part of the strategy of any company that you can identify? I don't think so. I mean, companies may use litigation as a tool to protect their IP, expand their market share, but they don't actually want legal problems. That's an aggressive, proactive use of the legal process, not a reactive one. So again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a coach. I'm here to try to coach you to change. I want you to stop thinking like a lawyer. Okay? I want you to get out of law land. I want you to understand that you exist in the real world and you have to talk to business people. Okay? And business people actually aren't interested in interesting questions of law. They're interested in achieving their business objectives. You need to talk their language, not your language. I want you to be counselors, not lawyers. Because counselors, remember that 4 square box back at the beginning of this? Counselors provide true value because they avoid problems. It's kind of like being a parent or a high school teacher. You're surrounded by people who know that they're smarter than you, and you are in the way of their God-given right to do whatever they want. And so your question to them when they've given you a particularly boneheaded idea is, what was the idea that lost out to that one? Really, really powerful question. Okay? Because if it's a boneheaded idea and that's where they got to, I'd really like to understand how they got there. But counseling reduces costs, adds value. If you're an enterprise, it enhances your shareholder value, enhances your enterprise value. So I want to bring back that little chart, right? Do you see lawyer on this page? Anywhere? No. You know why? Because a lawyer is an operator. Okay? When the lawyer is doing lawyer stuff that involves the exercise of judgment, they're operating a process. Okay? They're operating a legal process. Issue opinion. Construe law. Those are processes. Okay? So the lawyer is an operator. And I know that's really, really offensive. But look at my face, not caring. Because in the enterprise, you have to play your position. Okay? Lawyers should lawyer, managers should manage, leaders should lead. The fact that you are a lawyer does not make you a manager or a leader. Okay? It may, because of state bar rules, currently make you an owner. But that's different. There can be a distinction between function and ownership. Now, it doesn't mean that lawyers can't be managers and can't be executives or leaders. It just means that they don't have a right to be that because of their position and that one little piece of paper they have. Now, personally, I like leading and managing a heck of a lot more than lawyering. You know, I've been a lawyer since 1982. I really don't think of myself that way. I think of myself as a race car driver, as a lifeguard, as a coach, as an executive. Now, I am, in fact, a lawyer. And it's part of my core purpose, just as it's part of a lot of people's in this room core purpose. But it doesn't give me the right to run an organization in and of itself. And I realize that is offensive to some people in the room. But I want you to think about, if it's offensive, then learn how to be a manager. Okay? Learn how to be a leader. Gain the right to those positions. Not because you have a book of business, but because you have the skill set. So, as lawyers, we can be firefighters and continue to be firefighters and do the triage on stuff and handle the stuff that comes in over the transom and be the hero. But I see Ron Friedman in the room here. He talks a lot about do less law. You know, the mantra across the industry right now is doing more with less. Okay? In the law firm world, a lot of times that means cutting out the back office. That's not the place to cut, folks. It's the front office. Okay? And I don't mean cutting heads, I mean cutting fat. I mean changing processes, making people more productive, more focused. The next stage in development is doing less with less. Less law with less resources. And then the end game, the nirvana, state of bliss, is doing less law with more impact. And that's where prevention comes in. That's when you can really add value to your customers, by preventing the legal problem from ever arising. So wherever you are today, what I've talked about is uncomfortable. It's part of my job here today, to get you out of your comfort zone. Wherever you are today, I want you to first take a stretch away from that. Start doing the hot washes in some of your processes. Start thinking more rigorously about behaviors within your enterprise and consistency. As you flex those muscles, and as you learn those techniques, and as you become more comfortable with them, and take a step out of your comfort zone. And eventually take that leap of faith. When you're ready, you take the leap. Where there is only one process owner for for each process in your company. Where you are doing process maps for everything that you do. Where you are pricing based upon value and E3 and the customer experience. And where you are looking at the environment that you're in with a focus on the customer. Now, focus on the customer does not mean focus on the customer as a source of revenue. It means focus on the customer and the customer's interests. Okay? The revenue will result from the work, from the performance, from the delivery of E3. So, we're going to do a real quick hot wash right now, because we got 2 minutes, and that's all it should take. And all I want you to do is tell me what went well in this presentation, and what are things that we ought to take a look at. What'd you like? What didn't you like? You like the room? As a presenter, I like the room. I mean, it's a pretty good room for me. But how's it working for you? Could you guys in the back hear me? Okay? Like the temperature, like the lighting? Had coffee outside? Yeah? Too cold? Okay. What about the content? What about the presentation? Give me some feedback. What went well? What didn't you like? Yeah. Okay, I can do that. Okay, it's hard in a group this big, but I just wanted to show you the technique. You can use this at the end of every meeting, at the end of every process. And as you do it, people get much more comfortable with giving constructive feedback. And once you get constructive feedback, then the organizer, in this case the presenter, me, or the organizers of the conference, but me as a presenter, we take that feedback back and we do it better next time. That's the whole point. So I want to thank you for your time. This presentation will be up. You can reach me if I can help in any way. Please fill out the session evaluations. We really need your feedback. And thank you very much.